The Telos Boltor is a weapon available from the Arbiters of Hexus Syndicate or by trade from someone who does have standing in that syndicate. It's generally considered the worst syndicate primary weapon, with the possible exception of the Secura Penta depending on taste. It's generally best to consider this a variant of the Boltor Prime rather than the regular Boltor, given the stat similarities between the two. I wanted to delve into this weapon to see if it was really as bad as other people were saying, if it had any redeeming traits, since player opinion will only take you so far. When I first tried out the Telos Boltor, I found that it handled enemies up to around level 45 relatively easily. I did try out two builds, one with primed cryo rounds in the Vazarin slot or D polarity, and one without because I know not all players have a primed cryo rounds. What I found was that there wasn't a huge difference at that kind of enemy limit of level 45 between the two builds, but as you went lower in level, the raw damage of a primed cryo rounds was more efficient. I'll be talking about the innate truth effect on the Telos Boltor in depth a little bit later, but first let's cover the differences between it and a Boltor Prime. The Boltor Prime does 10% more base damage than the Telos Boltor and has a slightly higher fire rate, 10 rounds per second versus the 9.33 on the Telos Boltor. The Telos variant does make up for this with a 50% larger magazine size, but that doesn't quite catch it up DPS-wise, and the two end up about 20 DPS apart. The two significant differences are the status chance and accuracy differences between the two weapons. The Telos variant does have a noticeably lower accuracy than the Boltor Prime, making it not a very great candidate for heavy caliber. And while a difference of 2.5% status may not seem like a lot, when we're talking about a difference between 7.5% on the Telos and 10 on the Boltor Prime, once you add mods, it is a noticeable difference. While it does come with two innate polarities, installing a catalyst on the Telos Boltor does make a significant difference in the performance of the weapon. Unfortunately, the catalyst by itself can't quite bring the weapon up to what I would consider endgame content, level 80 and above enemies. It tops out around level 75. That being said, if you are going to put a catalyst onto your Telos Boltor, you should have 2 or more Forma in reserve to use as well. With the first Forma, I replaced the Vazarin polarity with a Madurai polarity, and with the second one, I added a Naramon polarity. On primary weapons, the Vazarin polarity is just simply too limited to leave on when you're trying to use all 8 mod slots. These two Forma were enough to make the weapon perform reasonably well against level 100 enemies, but if you're a big fan of the weapon, you could always add an additional Forma in order to include maxed out mods. I was surprised while leveling the Telos Boltor at how quickly the truth effect filled and how high it kept my health. Now, the truth effect does have to cool down between procs, but it does gas damage in a large area and restores 25% of your Warframe's max health. It also increases parkour maneuvers, notably bullet jump velocity, which can help you move a bit more quickly, but overall that parkour bonus is the least of what it does. One of the main questions players raise when talking about the choice between this weapon and the Boltor Prime is whether or not the truth effect is worth it. And what it really comes down to, like many other things, is player preference. This truth proc will clear out large amounts of lower level enemies very easily, where the Boltor Prime does not. However, the Boltor Prime does perform better with the same number of Forma installed against high level enemies. On a Warframe with high effective health, the Telos Boltor may come out on top simply because of the healing that it does. However, since the Boltor Prime was recently re-vaulted after its unvaulting and won't be available again for players to get from relics for quite a while, this is what I recommend to players if they like the regular Boltor and want an upgrade to it. Or that's what I would say if it didn't have a mastery rank lock of 12. And that, I think, is where the argument really lies between the Prime and Telos variant of the Boltor. This weapon does not feel like a Mastery Rank 12 weapon, and by the time you have access to it, there will be so many more effective weapons that you've already put the time, Catalyst, and Forma into that it is considered Mastery fodder simply because of that. And maybe down the line the Boltor Prime will be just ludicrously expensive on trade, and you'll have to get the Telos Boltor if you really love that style of weapon and want something that's usable in endgame content. As I was considering solutions to the Telos Boltor having such a high required mastery level, it occurred to me that some portion of players may actually reach the point where they can buy this from a syndicate after having reached rank 5 in the syndicate, but not actually be able to get it because they have too low of a mastery rank. And so I think to remedy both of these problems, DE should release another set of syndicate weapons. One weapon per syndicate, available at syndicate level 3, mastery rank 5. Move the Telos Boltor down to that point, release 5 more, one for each syndicate, and replace where the Telos Boltor is right now with a new Telos weapon. Overall, I was surprised that the Telos Boltor, given its lackluster supplementary stats, was able to perform at a good level. What really holds this weapon back is the mastery rank requirement. But if you like the Boltor and either don't have access to the Prime or like the additional healing that the Telos variant gives you, it's not too bad. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and have a great day.